English 121, Intro to Field Research, from the Allen and Bacon Guide, pages 191 to 226. Your book talks about two types of field research in particular that can be challenging when new to conducting field research. The first of these is the questionnaire or survey. There are two main types of questionnaire questions: open-ended and closed-ended questions. Open-ended questions are less focused, allowing for a variety of responses. An example would be, what do you think of the opportunities for public transit in Fort Collins? These questions will allow for a variety of unique responses. However, they can be more difficult to compile and tabulate numerically. As opposed to open-ended question, your book also talks about closed-ended questions. These types of questions have a tighter focus, which limits the options for responses. An example would be, what are the opportunities for public transit in Fort Collins? Unlike open-ended questions, these types of questions are easy to tabulate numerically, but they usually limit the responses subjects can provide. There are several types of closed-ended questionnaire questions, including yes and no, multiple choice questions, checklists, and ranking lists like the Likert scale. Keep in mind strategies for composing effective survey questions. Effective survey questions will be clear and focused, will be shaped for a target audience, will avoid confusing or ambiguous language, will be respectful and remain somewhat objective, will take into account different uses for open-ended and closed-ended questions, will avoid skewing responses or leading respondents toward one response or another, will have an introductory comment that explains the survey's purpose and why the knowledge gained from the survey will be beneficial to others, will most importantly address the writer's purpose, so you're trying to find out what people know and think about a topic, and finally, will have an effective design. If it looks confusing or overwhelming, or if it is very difficult to understand where and how to respond, it probably won't work very well. In addition to questionnaire techniques, your book also talks about interview strategies, or ways to make your interviews more effective. When conducting an interview, just as with your questionnaires, consider your purpose. Consider what you hope to learn from the interview based on your research question. Then, learn about your subject. Research important subjects related to the research question and the person you are interviewing. The first step is to make an appointment. Don't be shy. Most people will be flattered that someone is interested in what they do or their opinion. From there, you can make a list of questions. Don't be afraid to be flexible and let the interview itself guide the conversation, but always refer back to your list to stay on track. Sequence your questions appropriately. Begin with more objective, factual questions, and then move on to more subjective or controversial issues later. It's always a good idea to prioritize your questions so that you make sure you can cover the most important information if the conversation goes in an unexpected direction. Always refer back to your list of questions to stay on track. Sequencing your questions this way will give you a plan for what to do if your subject either talks a lot or talks very little. Always remember to phrase questions so that they require more than just a one-word answer. And try to keep your biases and own opinion out of the questions so you avoid leading your respondents. Once you have your list of questions, you can start to gather your supplies. Be sure to bring recording equipment if needed or paper to take notes. When conducting the interview, begin by introducing yourself and describing your investigation. Listen carefully to what your subject has to say and ask follow-up questions. These might include, what information do you have on that? Or what do statistical studies suggest? Ask your respondent, in your opinion, do these data show any trends? Or what memorable experiences have you had with this topic? Then, While the interviewee is answering your questions, be sure to take notes. Use a tape recorder if you have to. If you don't understand something your subject says, make sure to ask him or her to clarify. When taking notes, also include some description of your observation of the scene, what the subject looks like, and the atmosphere you're in while conducting the interview. And then, don't forget to ask for additional leads or sources. And at the end, express your thanks and ask if you can follow up later, if needed. It's always good to keep in touch with the interviewee afterwards. And remember to be courteous, listen attentively, don't interrupt, and say thank you. And then immediately after the interview, go over your notes. Write down all of your thoughts and other questions that you might still have. Keep these strategies in mind when conducting interviews and questionnaires for your field research.